Hello and welcome to Down to the Tyre. Today I am joined by the 2023 F4 US Vice Champion and a driver who competed in FROC this year. It's Titus Sherlock. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on the podcast. It's good to be here.
Of course, because I think you found my podcast quite early on. I remember I think you followed me back on Instagram quite a while ago. So I'm really glad to finally have you on.
Yeah, I remember seeing a podcast that was about junior formula. There's not, too many of those, so I figured I'd give it a listen.
Honestly, thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah, there really isn't many. That's why I chose to focus on it. And honestly, I think it's a common thing I've said. This isn't too controversial for me to say on here, but feeder series races are way more exciting than F1
Oh, I fully agree with you. Yeah, definitely. I'd definitely rather watch an F3 race or something than an F1 race.
any day. And it's nice to be able to say that without it being controversial. I feel like it's just facts.
Yeah, I think anyone in the motorsport world would probably agree with you.
Absolutely. So I want to dive right in. I want to, obviously, I've said you did FROC this year. I want to talk about that. But firstly, I want to go back in time a little bit. How did you kind of fall into racing in the first place?
So my family was involved in racing, but a different type. My dad used to race skateboards actually, and then he did some off-road trucks. And that's actually where I started. When I was 10, I did some, they're called trophy carts. They're like little off-road trucks. I only did that for a year, then I had to stop. And then a couple of years later, when I was, I think, 12 or 13, my uncle took me to the F1 race in Austin at COTA. And I pretty much just fell in love. And I actually remember watching F4 US that weekend as well. And I thought it was really cool. I didn't really know that stuff like that existed. So we ended up getting into karting very soon after. And that's pretty much how it started.
That's awesome. And as I mentioned in the intro, you actually ended up doing F4 US and doing very well in it as well. What was that experience like racing in a championship that you'd watched as a kid?
It was pretty cool, especially when I won at COTA this year. I remember, watching them race at COTA, and that was what really got me into it. And it was pretty surreal to be kind of standing there like, wow, I'm one of them now. I got here somehow. And yeah, it's very cool. And especially being at COTA as well, when you first go down like the back straight and you see all the F1 stuff, it's pretty surreal. So it's very cool.
Obviously I'm from the UK, so I'm not too versed on the kind of American circuits that the feeder series race on outside of COTA, of course. What are the other circuits like? Are they quite similar to COTA?
Now, COTA is a big outlier here. Obviously, it's the only F1 track, like only permanent F1 track, I should say. And all the other ones are more kind of old school. They're all no runoff. They're very tight, very natural terrain, up, down, kind of hard to overtake on, but they're very cool. It's kind of like, I don't know, they're like European circuits, but like the old versions. So it's a lot of fun.
Awesome. And in F4 US, a lot of your competitors actually ended up doing FROC with you as well. And also you were with Kiwi Motorsport, who you'd raced with before in the US. So those kind of similarities, bringing them over from America to New Zealand, how did that kind of help you settle into FROC this year?
Yeah, it was great being with the team I'd already been with in the past and already knowing everybody. It's kind of how Kiwi's development is working right now. They start with F4 in the US, bring them to FROC to prepare for FR in America is essentially how they've been doing it for a couple of years now. And it's been working really well, and it was good to I already knew all my teammates already. Some of the crew were a bit different, obviously. Some of them were local, but it was really great, and it was great to go against drivers that I already knew, Patrick and Jet and all of them. So it was made adapting a little bit easier.
I was going to ask what kind of entices American drivers to do FROC, but as you've just said, they kind of have that pathway in
Yep.
place. That's really
Yeah,
cool. So that's kind of like a nice, it gives you a bit of a break from racing in America just for a little winter series and then back into America again.
yeah, and there's no other Formula Regional Winter Series here. There's a couple like on the IndyCar side of things, but it's a really great championship as well. And like I said, it's how Kiwi have been developing their drivers, and it's also relatively cost effective as a driver as well compared to like the Middle East Championship and stuff. So
Yeah, definitely. And as we've already said, a lot of your teammates in FROC were also people you were racing against in America in F4 US. How did that kind of dynamic change when you were in New Zealand compared to when you were in F4 US? Was it very similar racing against them on those new circuits, or did it kind of add a new level of challenge to it?
It was definitely a bit different. I mean, the racing there was just a lot different than F4 in the US. It was also a different dynamic as well because in the US, me and Patrick were kind of fighting for the championship, where in Oceanic that wasn't the case. So it was a bit more of working together. There's a little bit less of a rivalry, I would say. And yeah, also some of us improved a lot. Jet improved a lot. Landon improved a lot, and we were all very close. And it was a good time. And it was definitely different than racing in the US because you have to be a lot more strategic with your passes since it's a lot more difficult. And you really have to focus on being consistent and not making mistakes. So
Yeah, I was going to ask that about the New Zealand circuits, kind of like how they differ from the American ones, kind of what you had to adapt to race on those circuits compared to the American ones.
they're very tough to pass on. It's essentially, I don't want to say it's a qualifying championship, but if you have a bad qualifying, you're going to have a bad weekend. There's not really a big way to recover from it. Um, that's because of the tracks being very tight, and also the car has quite a bit of dirty air, so it's very hard to follow. In the US and F4, you could be a second slower than someone and still find a way to pass them somehow. But here, you really have to have a big pace advantage, and where you finish lap two will probably be around where you finish the race. So it's very important to nail qualifying, and that's something that us as a team really kind of struggled with this year, which made the season kind of tough. But I'm looking forward to coming back to the US and being able to pass a bit more, I think, and having some better racing.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of difficult to adapt if you're used to a strategy where you are able to make the most of the overtaking opportunities in the race to it relying more on qualifying. In terms of your kind of racing style and your approach going into the weekend, would you say that you feel like you're a stronger driver in the races than you are in qualifying?
I've always been stronger in the races. I mean, in F4 last year, we had some good qualifyings as well. But yeah, I've always been better in races. So that kind of made it a bit tough. And also, it was our first time on Pirelli tires, which they have a shorter window, and it's really important to nail that window in qualifying. And that was really a big struggle for us, as we just weren't getting it in the window at the right spot and putting the lap together when we needed to. So hopefully, being back on the hand clips in the US, it's a bit more of a just drive really hard, and it'll get faster and faster. And who's ever fast at the end is on pole usually. So it's a lot more fun that way, I think. And hopefully, we can be better at that when we come back.
Yeah, because I've heard a lot of drivers kind of say that about the tires. With Pirellis, it's really all about the management and making sure you can make your tires last till the end of the race. Whereas with the Hankooks, as you said, it's a lot more just go all out. So with that, with the Pirelli tires, do you feel like would you ever want to race on the Pirelli tires again, or are you very fixed on staying on that American ladder, making the most of actually being able to go all out?
I'd be perfectly fine never racing on them again, to be honest. I mean, when they're in the window, they're pretty quick. They're like a second faster, a second and a half faster, but they go away and you have to manage a bit in the window and the prep laps and the cool down laps. It was my first time ever doing cool down laps actually, so that was new. And yeah, the hand click I enjoyed a lot more, even though it's a bit slower. You just go try to be fast. That's how you're fast is by pushing really hard. So I enjoy that a lot more.
Yeah, I can imagine it's a lot more fun not having to just constantly be thinking in the back of your head, oh, I can't go as fast as I'd like to because what if my tires go and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And we actually anticipated it being a little bit worse than it was. And then some races we managed the whole time and realized, okay, we probably didn't need to manage that much. And there was pace that we just didn't use. So it's kind of a fine line. And yeah, I look forward to just being able to drive fast again.
Absolutely. And with FROC, obviously, we've said there's a lot of drivers who come over from America to do it, but then there's also quite a few native Kiwi drivers who do it as well. What's it kind of like racing against those drivers who obviously have grown up racing in that country? They know the tracks, they know the climate, they're very used to racing in New Zealand. What's it kind of like to be adapting to so many new things at once, as we've mentioned, the tires, the tracks, like all of that? Alongside people who are already a bit more versed with the New Zealand racing scene.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to just be able to compare yourself to them and see, where you stack up. And like you said, it was a lot of new things at once, new car, new tracks, tires, all of that. So there's a lot of learning and being able to learn from them. It is a data share championship. So whoever's fastest, you get their data no matter what team they're on. So it's great just to, learn. And most of us go there to learn. It's a winter series. The results don't matter too much. So it's just learning and it's great to learn against great drivers.
I was going to ask about that with it being a winter series because I feel like there's been quite a few drivers in particular that I've noticed who've done Formula 3 after doing something like Formula Regional Middle East. Like Pepe Marti, for example, it felt like when he stepped back into that F3 car after doing that Formula Regional Middle East winter season, he was just on another level when he stepped back into F3. How kind of essential and useful and important do you feel like doing a winter series is, and how much can it change your performance?
It can help a lot. You really get to go into the season with the rust already shaken off. Having 5 back-to-back weekends of racing is invaluable, really. Seat time is very important. And it was my first time having the privilege of doing a winter series. I've never been able to do that in the past, so hopefully the difference can be seen this year. And it just, private testing is great, but racing is kind of irreplaceable. It's a very valuable experience. So it's very good. And yeah, you can see the results in the past with drivers going back and doing it and being better afterwards. So hopefully the same happens with me.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. And as we said, like as you said, like having that time off track, just it kind of can stunt your growth. And there's quite a few drivers who are getting towards the top end of the feeder series ladder, doing well in F2 and then kind of having nowhere to go and ending up just kind of in a reserve role, kind of on the sidelines. What are your kind of thoughts on that? I know it's obviously a couple of steps up the ladder from where you are now, but what are your thoughts on the fact that there are kind of a lot of drivers who are showing their potential and then they're ending up not with a race seat?
Yeah, it's a big shame. I think there's no rookies in F1 this year, if I'm not mistaken. So that's a shame. I mean, I'd say half the F2 grid is capable, and quite a few of them would be very capable. So hopefully something can be done about that. I mean, something that's great about the IndyCar ladder is you do see success is rewarded a lot of the time. And if you're a champion in Indy next, you are guaranteed actually it's in your prize that you're going to be in IndyCar at least a little bit. So hopefully something can be done about that because yeah, there's just great drivers that end up in a reserve role for maybe 2 years and then the next guy comes along and takes that from them and then they go do whatever else. So hopefully more seats can open up in the future. I think it'll start to happen soon. There's kind of some of the older drivers hanging around and then the next kind of 3 years, I think some of them will start to leave. So yeah, hopefully some new guys can get a chance.
Yeah, I feel like that's something that the IndyCar ladder does and handles so much better. Does that kind of make you, obviously, I don't know if you kind of if you lean more towards wanting to end up in F1 or in IndyCar, but is that something that makes you lean more towards sticking with the American feeder series ladder?
Yeah, they reward success a lot. So in the USF championships, which is the IndyCar side of things,
Mm.
the champion gets a scholarship to race in the next level. It's not all of the budget, but it's like 70% of it, which is a huge benefit. I could be wrong, but I think if you win the F3 championship, you get essentially nothing. So it really rewards success, and it doesn't guarantee it, but we've seen some great drivers recently, like Michael D'Orlando and Miles Rowe, get a chance because of that scholarship, which is great. And yeah, they do that really well. So I think F1 should look into doing something like that. Obviously, you can't make every single F4 championship do that because they don't own it. But the stuff that they do own, I think they should look into doing stuff like that.
Yeah, I definitely agree because I just think it's the F1 feeder series ladder only really works if you have the budget yourself to make that jump. And if you don't have that budget, then you're kind of just left, even if you have talent. And I feel like there's a lot of reliance on driver academies and getting sponsors, but obviously that's very hit or miss. It's just whether you're in the right place at the right time, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, most drivers are just doing it off of money from their family. I mean, some drivers have sponsors and that's great, but most of the time that's not really the case. I mean, you'll see, family logos and stuff like that, but and then I mean, it's just so much down to money these days. Some drivers, I mean, most of the time you're actually paying to be on the academies as well. So, and they won't pay for you. So it's about finding budget and selling yourself to sponsors and stuff. And we've seen a lot of that in kind of social media recently. Some drivers are making a career not because of their exceptional driving capabilities, but because they're able to market themselves and be popular online, and that's very valuable now.
Yeah, it's almost like you're expected to be this kind of public figure celebrity, if that word works, alongside being a driver, when in reality, I almost wonder with some of those drivers who are doing that. Obviously, as you said, sometimes they aren't the drivers who are maybe doing the best in the championships on track. Are they having to put so much of their energy into that kind of public facing social media side to things where it's actually negatively affecting their performance on track? I don't know.
I mean, yeah, I mean that definitely could be possible, but you have to give them credit. They're doing a great job being able to, find money to go racing. I mean, I won't name the name, but I know someone personally who didn't really have too much budget as of a year ago, but they have a pretty decent following now, and now they're kind of able to find sponsors, and now they're actually able to do a couple races this year. So it's super valuable, and it's not something I've really taken advantage of yet because I don't really know how to, and I don't really want to be honest. But I guess maybe I'll have to in the future.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely amazing how quickly some drivers have managed to turn it around when they have been in difficult financial positions, and then they've been able to kind of, as you said, sell themselves and get those opportunities. Do you feel like in America that's sort of less of a problem because of those sponsorship opportunities, or do you feel like even though that is an opportunity if you are at the top, there are still drivers who are maybe having more learning years in championships where they're taking their time rather than just bam, bam, bam going through the ranks? Do you
Right.
find that there are still drivers in America who are struggling more with budget?
Yeah, I mean, racing in America is generally a bit cheaper than Europe to start with, but the scholarships that they award is only to the champion, right? And there's 20 other or more than 20 other people still on the grid that aren't going to get anything, or maybe to get second, you get a little bit, but it's still the same struggles really. I think there's probably more American companies that are willing to sponsor drivers, maybe a bit, but I wouldn't say it's anything too significant. And most of the time, as a driver, you have to go find the sponsors yourself. They're not going to come to you, even if you're doing really well. They're not going to come to your front door and be like, "Hey, we want to give you money. Go race." You really have to figure it out yourself. And if you're winning, that's great. It looks better on your CV, but you have to go find it yourself. And those scholarships are great, but they only help one person on the grid. So
Yeah, absolutely. I just went on a right tangent about that. Like, we were talking about FROC, and I just went because I find that side to it so interesting. But we'll circle it back to FROC now because that is kind of obviously the main focus with you having just completed that. I was wondering, kind of overall, obviously there's 5 rounds in the season. What would you say were the highs and the lows of the championship for you overall?
it was pretty low the whole time, to be honest. We just got kicked in the face every single weekend with something really. Most of the time it wasn't our fault. Um, I think 3 times we got taken out on lap one of race one. And when you get taken out in race one, not only does it ruin race one, but it ruins race two. And then twice it also ruined that set of tires. So I had old tires for the future race, and there just wasn't much we could do about it. Um, so yeah, we also had I think 4 DNFs, a couple dead last, a couple laps down because of random issues. I think we were pretty much midfield the whole time. We definitely weren't going to win the championship if that stuff didn't happen. But I think I ended up finishing second to last in the championship, which is pretty disappointing considering I think we should have been like eighth probably if things went our way. But that last weekend was really bad, and that one was that was on me. We had a good weekend going. We had the Grand Prix in the F1 style qualifying, and I binned it in Q1 when we easily had a car for top five probably. So that one was on me, but the rest of the season was kind of just unfortunate event after unfortunate event. We had a couple good races sprinkled in there. The rain in Manfield particularly was really good. We started at the back because again we were taken out in race one by someone, but ended up finishing I think seventh twice from the back. So that was pretty decent. But it was just a lot of learning and a lot of setbacks. But I think it'll make me. I'm a better driver than I was 7 weeks ago. So that was the goal.
I almost feel like sometimes you learn more through those moments than you do if you were P1 every single weekend. Like you learn more from the challenges, I guess, even though they're pretty rough to go through.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, even in the F4 season, we had a lot of that. It wasn't quite as bad, obviously, because we still finished second, but um, you learn a lot through adversity and you become stronger afterwards. And yeah, it's all learning, and you're better off for it afterwards, even if it hurts in the moment, I guess.
How do you sort of handle, as you said, there were moments in the season where you did just get taken out. It was just, there was nothing you could do about it. How do you kind of handle those? I guess, like, obviously, it's a difficult one because the drivers who are at at this level of the feeder series are, I think people forget how young that some of the drivers are sometimes, and they forget that everyone is still learning, not just on track, but also learning how to kind of handle their emotions when bad things do happen and handle their reactions to things. How do you feel like you've kind of grown to approach when someone does just take you out?
It's changed a lot because the last time it happened, in New Zealand, I almost didn't. I don't want to say I didn't care, but I almost felt so indifferent since I was so used to it. I was like, okay, this is just something that happens, and it's okay. We'll move on from it. It was at turn one at Euromark, which was the second to last round, and a driver went for a ambitious move, let's say, and it ruined both of our races and weekends, and for him, his whole season. And it was just like, man, okay, like I'm sorry, he's sorry. We got to move on and think about the future because you can't change the past. And when it first happened, a couple of years ago in my career, when things would go bad, I would be a little bit more emotional and be upset because when you're at this level, each race kind of can be your last, especially if you don't have a huge budget behind you or, you know, or your last season, you don't really know what's coming. So when these opportunities get taken away or things end short, it's pretty disappointing, but you just got to move past it. And I think I've gotten pretty good at that now.
Yeah, definitely. It must be so hard. Like I think you're like almost the natural response is to be very angry. So you have to have such a level head to just kind of go, okay, this has happened, let's move forward, especially as you said, when it can lead to the car being super damaged and then affecting future races. How did you kind of approach that with the team as well, obviously, because they're the ones who are having to sort that. How do you kind of approach that when you know it's right at the start of the weekend? Because I know that obviously did happen to you.
Yeah, I felt bad for my team every single time, especially at the last race when the car was very badly damaged and they had to rush to get it fixed. And I felt bad about that. And ultimately the crash damage comes out of the driver's pocket, so it really can affect your future. And especially, it doesn't matter whose fault it is. If the car's damaged, you have to pay for it. It doesn't matter you know, if someone else took you out or if you did it by yourself. So you just have to move forward. And I felt bad for the team. I did the best I could to help, but it is what it is. And it's the same for them. They have to just get their head down, work harder, and think about the future because can't change the past.
Yeah, definitely. And I know we mentioned the New Zealand Grand Prix briefly as well. I know obviously that round didn't go to plan either, but obviously New Zealand Grand Prix is such a prestigious, unique kind of racing event. It's apart from Macau, it's the only kind of race in the feeder series that's like that, I'd say. What's it kind of like competing in an event like that? Obviously, so many other drivers kind of joined the grid for that and everything. What's it like competing in that kind of one-off Grand Prix event? And would you ever considered doing one like Macau further down the line?
It was very cool. It was a very big event. There's a lot of fans there, and there's a whole, grid celebration thing, and it has a lot of history and a lot of great winners, and it meant a lot. And like you said, a lot of people came just for that race. That was our biggest grid of the year. The race itself, I think I only did one lap or two, so it didn't go to plan, but it was really great to be a part of it and to be a part of that weekend. There's a lot of fans, and it was really cool. And also that series and that race is really big in New Zealand, actually. I didn't really realize it until I was there, but whenever you go to the airport or restaurants, it's literally just playing our races 24/7. Every single time we went out, it was just our races because they don't have F1 races or IndyCar races or NASCAR or WEC. It's really just, you know, that's kind of their biggest series. So they take it very seriously, and it was very cool to see.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting to think that because obviously I feel like with other countries like Formula Regional, for example, being from the UK, Formula Regional isn't really quite a big thing here because it's the European one. So it doesn't really happen in the UK that often. But it's strange, like, yeah, to think that it's so huge there. I guess it's been going for ages, hasn't it? Obviously, as TRS before it was Formula Regional, but I guess it's got a lot of history in New Zealand.
Yeah, I think they're on year 20 or so, or almost that. So they've been going for a while. And in the UK, you have F1, you have everything there. Really, you have a lot of racing series in the UK. Where in New Zealand, they don't have a whole lot, and we're pretty much well, it's the only single seater championship with wings and slicks. They only have Formula Ford, so it's pretty much the biggest championship they have that's single seater. So that's why it's pretty big there and popular. And it was unique being recognized in public a couple times. That definitely would never ever happen here. Of course, people ask for pictures, but they just want a picture because you're a driver, not because they actually know who you are. So that was unique and that was very cool. So they take it very seriously. It was really cool to see.
Yeah, that kind of links to my next question. It gives a glimpse into it, but I was going to kind of ask like what it was like kind of being in New Zealand for, obviously it was 5 consecutive rounds, which is quite unique for a championship. Usually there's kind of weekends off and stuff. And what was it like getting to kind of immerse yourself in the country and the culture of New Zealand outside of when you're not on track or not at the circuit?
It was very cool. I mean, I've never been away from home for 6 or 7 weeks or whatever it was. So that was very cool. And it was very, I mean, we're at the track most of the time. We're at the track Wednesday through Sunday every single week. So there wasn't a whole lot of downtime. But we did get to do some cool stuff on the Mondays and Tuesdays on the travel days. Me and some of my teammates and other friends, went and did random touristy stuff and that went to the beach and whatnot. So it was fun. And New Zealand is a very, very beautiful country, especially the South Island. The mountains and the water was very nice, and the towns were very small and clean, and yeah, just really cool. A lot different than America. Things are a lot slower there. There's not a whole lot going on. It's just a nice small town, and they live their lives, I guess. Not a whole lot going on, but it was very cool, and I definitely go back for sure.
Did you find it like quite tiring to do 5 weekends in a row, or because it was only the 5 and you knew it wasn't a full season, did it kind of feel a bit more manageable?
At the t at the races, I felt okay, and it didn't really hit me until I got home. Of course, there was the jet lag too, but it was like, wow, okay. I took like 3 days of like, wow, I'm really tired. I definitely need to take some days off and recover. But yeah, it was very intense, being on track that often. The car itself is not too physical, but still, it's a very physical sport, and it was tough. As I think mentally as well, just not really having a whole lot of break and a whole lot of time to process things. It was just kind of right into the next thing every single time. So I guess that's good in some ways as well. And it's very good as a driver to go into a race weekend already being not rusty. You were just in the car 2 days ago, so you're just kind of right back into it, and it's good for development for sure.
And obviously, you've got a bit of a break now, but I've got to ask about later this year. Obviously, you mentioned that the path that Kiwi Motorsport typically take is towards Formula Regional Americas. Is that your plan for 2024? I'm not sure if you've announced anything or if you're allowed to say anything, but
Nothing is signed yet, but that's the current plan. That was the goal. It was to prepare for Formula Regional here, and it's a great series. It's also looks like it's going to be on the up this year. There's gonna be more cars, which is great, and it's a great series. So hopefully I can be a part of it for sure.
yeah, I'll admit, Formula Regional Americas is probably the one that I'm least familiar with, obviously being from the UK and with FRECA kind of being the main Formula Regional series in Europe, which is obviously so close to the UK, and then Middle East and Oceania being on in the winter. So it's kind of when there's not much else on, and they're nice to get invested in the winter. I will admit I'm not too versed on Formula Regional Americas. So yeah, if you could just tell me anything you think I should know about the season, because I want to start watching it this year.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, like you said, FRECA kind of takes the spotlight. There's a couple others in the summer. I think there's Japan,
Yeah.
America, and maybe one more that I'm forgetting. But it's a great championship, and especially this year, I think we're gonna have a couple driver or maybe 5 drivers fighting for wins. Yeah, it's broadcasted same weekends as the F4 weekends. The broadcasts are good. It's a different car. It's not the same form the regional that's used in Europe or the Oceania or Middle East. That's all the Titus car. We use our own Ligier that's built here in America. It's a bit different. It's a bit faster in some ways and slower than others, but it's still same regulations, very similar. And yeah, the last couple of years we've had some pretty good champions as well. I think a lot of them are in IndyCar now. There's Kyle Kirkwood, Kiffin Simpson, Lundqvist, and obviously Callum Hedge this last year, who was in FROC last year, did a really great job here. So yeah, it's a great championship, and it's unfortunately struggled with a small grid for a couple years in a row now, but it looks like it's actually on the up again this year, and hopefully we'll have like 18 or 16 or somewhere around there. So that would be really, really good.
I was going to say, kind of my main thing I struggle with FRECA is the fact that I feel like sometimes the grid is almost too big, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like I don't want to complain about there being lots of drivers being able to take part, but sometimes it can be quite hard to follow as a fan. Sometimes there's like nearing 40 cars involved and it gets a bit
Yeah.
manic.
Yeah, I think they have to split it up on some tracks. At least in
Yeah.
F4 they did this year. They had like 2 rounds because there was too many drivers. So I mean, I guess it's a good problem for them to have.
Yeah. Can't complain too much.
Yeah.
So that's really exciting. I'm really glad to hear that that's kind of on the cards for you this year. And as I said, I'm definitely going to be tuning in for the first time for me. So I'm really, really looking forward to it. And yeah, all the best for the future. I feel like it makes sense to kind of wrap it up there. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I really, really appreciate it. And as I said, best of luck with the rest of the year.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone for listening as well. If you're watching, make sure to subscribe and give it a thumbs up. If you're listening, please give the podcast a follow and a cheeky little 5-star review if you can. And you can find me at Down to the Tyre on every social media.